L.W.D. Laurence, The Master Key. Chapter 5, Lesson 4, The Great Gospel of Optimism. Let's go. There may spring up an objection that we're deluding ourselves by regarding things in this whole fashion. We see an emaciated, stooping figure painfully crawling along one of our busy streets, breathing with difficulty, the limbs trembling as with ague, and almost giving way with each step. The eyes seek the ground. The figure shrinks as though striving to escape notice. Drink, want, disease, and vice have each imprinted their marks upon the creature. When we think of man, the marvelous things he has done in art, invention, science, literature, philosophy, commerce, engineering, transforming wilderness and deserts into beautiful cities with stately architecture, the forces of nature ministering to his numerous wants quickly and quietly, when we regard such a creature and identify him with man, are we honest? The tottering, shrinking wretch is real, but it would be a libel on humanity to admit him into the same class. While it is true that man is higher than the beasts, it is equally true that he has the power to sink below them. The ideal man is as real as the despicable wreck we have been dealing with here, and it only remains for the student to ask himself this: is it more common sense to take this poor wretch as an exemplar, or the highest man history places before us? Which will give rise to the loftiest conceptions of humanity? Is it obvious that, well, it is obvious that if the mind becomes that on which it dwells, and the majority of the slum dwellers in any city prove it by their features, bearing, and gait, then we should ignore the caricature as such. If surroundings do not count, why seek to abolish ugliness? Why lay out parks, provide art galleries, luxurious buildings, if refinement is not an adjunct to existence, and somewhat above that lived by the masses, if it does not conduce to more happiness, a fuller life, then one might as well fall back into the slough of the submerged. We all recognize tacitly, it may be in many cases, that education and a civilized environment tend to the upliftment and the betterment of humanity. More and more writers and teachers advocate the viewing of life through rose-tinted glasses, and naturally, for it is the kernel of the great gospel of optimism, which is being wholeheartedly preached in the United States in a lesser degree in England. Adopt the same habit, idealize everything with which you come into contact. Do not pay attention to the negative part of anything, and as you succeed in doing this, you will see everything with an extended vision, to say nothing of being the happier for it. Happiness and true faith in oneself have more to do with concentration than one would in oneself. Happiness and true faith in oneself have more to do with concentration than one would willingly admit. At first sight, if we are happy, we regard things in a different light, though, and we take interest in them. It's difficult to concentrate on anything in which you're not interested. It's difficult to be interested in anything you don't like. Students must, as a consequence, begin their exercises in concentration with those things they like, that they feel deeply interested in. And the deeper the interest, the easier it will be for them to give themselves up wholeheartedly to it. The want of a real live interest in a subject has had a lot more to do with the failure to concentrate than is generally imagined. The girl or youth who does not learn or grasp her or his or her lesson has not had the interest in it, which allows the finer part of the mind to be employed in absorbing and assimilating the knowledge placed before it. Concentration on columns of figures would seem to be, to the bulk of people, as distasteful as a piece of mental work which could be given the same human being. Hence, it would be approached with a positive dislike or loathing. Statistics is another form which most people shun because, as in figures, there's nothing to take interest in. Yet these things have an actual attraction for many people who really devour these disconnected facts and figures, deriving a satisfaction from them which is lent by the concentration expended on them. That is to say, the very effort to concentrate evokes a condition which not only enables things to be accomplished before with infinite labor, but a liking for the practice is engendered. Putting the mind into this state in which you have found a real interest in a thing, you have not to invoke the will to keep the mind one-pointed. The will has a part to play in concentration. Now, what that part is will be fully considered in its proper place further along in this work. To create an interest in a thing, find where it concerns us most. It often happens you do have something you do not like. And if that task calls forth repugnance, it is certain that you will not concentrate on it. Or you will concentrate on it in a very imperfect manner. You will, in addition, use a far larger amount of vital energy in doing the work than you are justified in doing. All mental force must be conserved, for the student will find that he needs every ounce he possesses. Some spend nearly one half. Many such more people. Now, what they generate uselessly, the reader should bear this in mind. It's possible to cultivate not merely an indifference to a thing you do not like, but to transmute that feeling of dislike utterly. If it be our work, and we've been put to this work against the grain, there may not appear to be any great virtue in trying to like it, but the fact of hating it creates a disharmony in the mind that we find quite inimical to mental growth and to all creative thought. Whatever be the duties we find we have to do, they must always be done with grace, with love, with the feeling that it is due to our higher conception to dignify a thing and not let it degrade us. When it is repulsive to us, our attitude should be to carry it out as well as we can, and this spirit will lead us to cease to be worried by the feeling of distaste. The task will become less uncongenial. If it's a piece of work requiring mechanical skill, we will not paralyze our best energies by the idea that we are incompetent to do it. It may be that you fail to perform it satisfactorily to your employer or yourself at first, but by calling to your aid the determination that you're not going to let the work be clumsily or inadequately done, you will invoke the cooperation of the best that is in you and do the work well. This will especially be the case later when the mind is grown by the exercises given in our work coming up. Much of the so-called incompetency of people does not proceed from stupidity, want of apprehension, or inferiority of mind powers, but in the low estimate they have always placed upon themselves and their work. It has well been said that you are here to do something which no one else can do but you. And what that work may be, no one can pretend to dogmatize upon, but one thing is clear. Every human being is an individual, and no two are alike, so that although the goal of humanity be a common one, no two people will reach it in the same way. Evolution is not merely an unfolding, but as Bergson has shown, it's a creating. So that the new is an actual fact in nature, and things are not a rehash. What man has done, man can do. That's no empty platitude, but a matter of exact science, so that any man who wishes to become a painter, a writer, an orator, a military leader, or anything else may do so, provided he follows the laws of mind. It's so easy to forget the potentialities within each of us because we never see them. And people usually only believe in those things that they see. That is why they are now and then dumbfounded when they hear of someone whom they knew well doing something really clever, or something for which they had never any hint that they possessed. If a man gets the idea that he is only common clay, that he is not clever like the people he knows or reads about, he closes the avenues of the mind wherein lie the same powers that the many envies or stands in awe of. Many men go through life for years before waking up to their possibilities, and then they suddenly discover the great within and the riches which repose therein. And they are no longer the poor creatures they were. History is full of such instances of men who were absolute dunces at school, or idle, dissipated, utterly aimless. The great bulk of mankind goes through life in this blind manner, though there are plenty of signs now that it's waking up, that the general level is being raised all around. If you induce other trains of thought, this is quite possible, you come to regard unpleasant duties in a new light. We see them as opportunities to show the metal we are made of. You begin to learn that you are greater than you supposed that you were, and that knowledge alone warms you to your work, quickens the intellectual powers, awakens the inventive areas of the brain, lends dexterity to the fingers or the limbs, calls forth care and precision in whatever be the work. A well-known teacher of dancing avers that the art of dancing is in the head, not the feet. This is one reason why a teacher in any subject is so useful. It's not that he himself does the work, but he shows that it's possible to be done. And the fact of seeing it done, or knowing that it can be done, provides the necessary stimulus to induce the tyro to make the attempt by arousing his faith. It further gives him the encouragement and sympathy to try to accomplish, and this putting forth of efforts increases in power and ability each time. Briefly, it is in the doing of a thing that we grow. The illustration of a piece of work. That we grow. Not the mere theorizing about it. The writer has used the illustration above of a piece of work, but it's equally applicable in the gaining of a mental faculty in any phase of character building, and readers should regard it in that light. It is practically immaterial to what purpose we apply the principle. It holds good in everything. Examine every unpleasant thing which you are called upon to do, and see if there is not some aspect about it which appeals to you. Some good point that merits commendation. In many cases, this will be found, and your interest will at once be awakened. Once aroused, you will see unsuspected features which will render it less irksome to fasten the attention on. And when this is so, concentration can be attained. The student who would learn to concentrate successfully must utterly reverse the methods which are generally taught. Just as the East adopts exactly the opposite system to that applied in the West in regards to science, the former seeking to perfect the instrument by which knowledge of the universe is possible, the mind. The subjective method, the West beginning with the universe and ending with man, or the objective method, so he must not commence with the without, but with the within. One must be serene. Serenity is the positive aspect, and worry, to which I have referred, is the negative. It's not sufficient not to worry, but one must cultivate a deep, quiet, peace-compelling atmosphere. Such an atmosphere of poise gives birth to forces awaiting our recognition. The usual conception of hustle and bustle being essential to accomplish anything is founded, like so much else in the world, upon appearances. The call of striving in order to achieve enters into nearly every aspect of existence, because there underlies every effort that principle is just eating the heart out of hundreds and thousands. Competition. a much misunderstood principle, which has its place in the order of things when rightfully understood. The universal urge, the cosmic whip, which eggs the individual on and on, promotes growth, makes for evolution when it is properly apprehended. It differentiates the thinking from the non-thinking portion of humanity. It takes the jellyfish, boneless, colorless, inchoate, vacillating creature and makes an individual out of him. When the notion of life being a battle gains ascendancy into the consciousness, then enmity toward all outside ourselves is generated. Fighting is the dominating idea. The struggle for existence, the weakest go to the wall, survival of the fittest are three classical phrases which well exemplify the spirit of the age and define the attitude taken by so many. Individuality is what evolution, or the principle of unfoldment, aims at, but it is the gaining of a strength to help not to crush. Strength of body and strength of mind are the desiderata of weary men and women, because a strong character is the normal outcome of eternal progress. Strength is evoked not to enable one to walk over those less strong than themselves, but for the purpose of helping them. Teacher and pupil must ever make up humanity, however high up the ladder of existence we mount. There are always those about the highest and noblest of us, and there are always those whose feet are as yet on the bottom rung of the ladder. The very phrase, the brotherhood of humanity, which is so much in the air today, and which finds more expression now than in any epoch of which we have any record, means that equality is impossible. Brother carries inherently in it one elder or younger than another member of the family. And those who deny the duty, who dare deny the duty of the elder to help the younger. Even among animals, with certain exceptions, this is a recognized principle. Therefore, how much more should it be so among human beings? So we have to abandon the idea of striving to attain. Violent effort, energy is necessary. So is ambition, zeal, faith, and belief. But none of these are to be used in the ordinary fashion. The spirit of serenity is the antithesis of strenuousness. And it is a strenuous life that is attempted by so many, and which yields so little. Yields so little in the bulk of cases. It is only as one learns to be serene that one knows that there are the finer forces within us, and it is only by the cooperation of those finer forces that we can make the best use of our mental powers. It is supposed by many that this quality is possessed by successful businessmen, but it is only partially practiced, because it is the surface of the mind which is used. Ask a successful businessman if he could keep his mind on one thing for 10 minutes. Even money making, or his business, or his favorite, most familiar thought. And he would find it to be a taxing thing. He might take half a dozen aspects of his business and think of each in turn, but this would be a very different matter to taking, as is often done in the East, a flower, focusing the mind on it to the exclusion of every other thought for 20 minutes or more. That's concentration. And the value of its acquisition, is that the tentacles of the mind can be dug into any problem, however abstruse, when its nature is understood, and all that it contains will be given up, because it is impossible for it to withhold them. I have elsewhere cited the case of a judge who knew positively whether a witness was telling the truth. And he acquired this marvelous and desirable faculty by concentrating on truth as a virtue. He actually fought up all there was of truth, till he became truth itself. A lie to him set his nerves jangling, just as a drink-sodden man carries with him an atmosphere extremely obnoxious to any sensitive man, or wild animals in their natural state. Bostock, the well-known animal trainer, knew this, and he found that a tamer in the habit of drinking was disliked very much by the animals, and his control over them was much slighter in consequence. To keep the mind on one point for 2 minutes is too arduous for many, and so long as there is a lack of serenity, this will be so. Business or professional men who can concentrate and yet who do not live a serene life simply force themselves to keep their minds on whatever they want, and they waste their forces and become prematurely old and worn out. You often hear such people say at the end of the day that they're fagged out. They've had a hard day. They've had many trying things. They got worked up almost one or another matter. Work, it should be borne in mind, never tires one. It is the spirit in which it is done that wearies. Even laborious work, when adequate rest is permitted, does not make one tired. Have you ever heard people say that they were tired of doing nothing? Have you not yourself experienced a feeling of tiredness spending a wet day at home or in very tedious company? All of us have at some point or other of our lives felt this. Invalids who make no greater physical effort than turning over in bed complain of being tired out. Well, what have they done to be fatigued? Well, the fact of being invalids to start with is proof positive of they're not living according to law. So, yeah, they may well be tired. Misused emotions, ill-governed feelings, bitterness of spirit, critical or other negative states, including worry, inharmony, fear, nervousness, hurry, all produce fatigue. Fatigue. And the fatigue which springs from mental causes is always more keenly felt than that from physical effort. The born tired type is no illusion. These people do genuinely feel tired whether they work or not, and they are confined to the masses. And they are not confined to the masses either. If we did but know it, energy in an unending stream is pouring into us every hour of the 24, and a few of us needn't be weary. I know the statement seems extreme, but students of mental discipline have proved it now for some time. A writer who has produced several books in 5 years, to say nothing of writing for 1 or 2 monthly magazines, says, I can now endure almost anything without feeling tired or worn. And my working capacity has more than doubled during the last few years. Still, I consider myself simply in the very beginning of this phase of the subconscious field. Now, if one is a sedentary worker, he need not feel tired by poring over his work several hours in succession. All he needs is change. But this is a question we must not pause over right now. Fascinating although it may be, it's only introduced here as it has a distinct bearing upon the matter under consideration. It is not the hard day that tires, but the spirit in which the work is done. And this frame of serenity introduced into the daily life will give a rest for what was once considered irksome, difficult, or even repulsive. The idea of fighting for one's living must be banished. The idea of coming into one's own, of daily unfoldment, daily growth, must be substituted. The notion of being overworked has gotten more common nowadays because things seem to have moved more quickly of late years. This has arisen through so many more interests being introduced into life. The attention is necessarily more divided as a result, and in this way, one can see how imperative it is to grow out of this misconception and gradually substitute harmonizing thought. Jangled nerves must be straightened out. You must not permit yourself to be put out by others or affected by what goes on in your own immediate environment. That it is unnatural attitudes of mind that cause weariness of body and not work, anyone may prove for himself. If you have certain work to do which seems distasteful or difficult, it may be only looking for a missing receipt or letter, or turning out on a wet night to visit someone living a mile or two away, you maybe feel irritable. This feeling may lead to a headache, sense of irritation. And irritation sets up molecular changes in the cells of the body. These changes are translated into that tired feeling, which advertisers of patent medicines are so fond of quoting by pushing their wares. And the whole body feels it. So a sleepless night, though the body lay 8 or 10 hours, will tire one on account of the toxins created in the tissues. Tiredness in many cases is simply fatigue, poisons generated in the body, and is not the slightest reference to the amount of labor performed. Chapter 6 will be Lesson 5, the abolition of worry, the acquisition of serenity and mind power. See you there in the next video of W.D. Laurence, the Master Key.